In today's video, we're going to build a simple calculator using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. As you can see here, we have the basics of a calculator. We have the clear button, the brackets, percentage, the operators on the left side here, a backspace button to delete, and the numbers and the decimal point there. So let's clear this, and let me just give you a quick demonstration. So let's do something simple. 2 times 5 is 21. Oh, wait, wrong number. Sorry, poor joke. Let's just do something a bit more complex. Add brackets. 8 times 9 plus 45 divided by 5 is equal to 81. Let's say we want to add to this. We actually want to say times 8. That will just then add that times multiplication on there. We can then say, actually, we want that to be times 8.8. And there you go. It will do all that calculation for you. And there you go. That's as simple and as cool as this is. So this is what we're going to be building today. We're going to start with the HTML and CSS, and then we'll implement the JavaScript and functionality of this later on. Let's get started. So the first thing we're going to want to do is, for starters, bring this back over here. Shrink that down, and also just, we'll go back to 100%, maybe 125%. There you go. You've got a full view there. Bring that over there, and let's go open up a folder. And I'm just going to open up this in Visual Studio Code here. And this is just going to give us a blank folder here. So let's see, can we get that to, boom, there we go. Snapped perfectly. Let's actually snap that in. There we go. Now they're both snapped. So we want 3 files. We want index.html. We want main.css. And we want main.js. Which all the files we'll need for this. Let's also zoom in one there just so you can see a bit better. And let's start off with just the boilerplate HTML code. So in here, we'll just go rename this to calculator. You can name it whatever you want to name it. And in here, we'll just create a link and we'll call this main.css. And there you go. So we've got link our main CSS. We'll then link our script here and just say main.js at the bottom here. Now, I'm going to wrap this in a div with app. And inside here, we'll have a calculator, if I can spell. Let me just quickly turn off Copilot, disable globally, just so he's not getting involved with this autocorrection. And then we're going to have a display with a .content and an input inside of there. We're then going to just quickly do one more div underneath this with the output. So this is going to be our display section. So this is going to be this screen right here. So on the right here, you can see this is going to be this screen at the top here. Then underneath the display, we're going to have our keys. And in our keys, we're going to have a few different things. We're actually going to have a div. Each div will have a data key, which will be equal to clear, and we'll have the class equal to key and action. And inside of here, we'll have a span with the actual names of this. So you can see there. So I'm just going to quickly add in all of these and all the data key names here, and I'll show you that at the, either by time lapse or however else we do this. Okay guys, and there we go. We now have all of the actual keys in place here. So you can see here we have a clear key, we have the brackets, we have the percent, the divide, we have the 7, 8, 9 keys, the times here. You can see also in the data key, this is the key we're going to actually be pulling through to actually do the multiplication. The key we need for the... This is basically the value of what's inside here. And this is what we're going to be using to do the evaluation of whatever operation we put in here. And there you go. So we're going to get more keys, 5, 6. Then we're going to have here minus in here. Again, 1, 2, and 3. Then we have the plus sign. And then here we have a backspace. So this is going to be our backspace. Just going to use a less than sign for this. You could probably get something better. And then 0, key, and then a decimal place key here, and then finally the equals key here to obviously equal everything up, or evaluate everything up. And there you go. So that is everything inside of here. That is what we need to do for our HTML. So hopefully that's pretty straightforward. Let's actually start a surfer now. So as you can see on the left, this is the previous one we had. I'm going to run something called npx surf dot. Now you need Node and npm installed to run this. If you have that installed, great. If you don't, please don't be intimidated. Just go to your file and double click this and it will open it up here. The reason I'm using the surfer here is because I find it easier to just open everything up in localhost, but you don't need to do this. You can actually just sort it yourself. So there we go. We'll just refresh. And now this is what the page currently looks like because we have no styling. Now there's a lot of styling to go through, so let's go through this pretty quickly. We're going to get a margin here. We're just going to set everything to 0, padding 0, box sizing border box. So we want to reset everything to be to its bare minimum here. We're then going to set the font. I'm just going to say sans serif, and you can do whatever font you want. We're then going to get the app and display this as flex with justify everything to the center. This is just going to be what pushes the calculator into the middle of the page. And then we're going to set the height as 100 VH just to make it there. And there you go. You can see everything's moved to the center there. We then want to get our actual calculator. And on our calculator, we want to add a background color. Now, this is going to be 22252D. Now, you can color this however you want. You don't have to copy my styling at all. You can style it however you want. But if you do want to follow along with the styling, it is here. And if you don't, feel free to skip this part. Go over to the JavaScript. And I will hopefully put a link with the source code down below so you can actually copy the CSS out of there if you want. So let's just go through here. 375 pixels, min height 640 pixel. And then we will say display flex. Flex direction column because we want everything to be stacked on top of each other. That'll be the display and the keys. And then we want a border radius of 1.5 rem. We then want overflow hidden on that just so nothing else hides out. And there you go. You can see all of this. It's starting to look a bit better, not perfect. But let's add the display in here. So let's just say display. And what we want to do is say min height of 200 pixels. We want a padding of 1.5 rem. We're going to get display of flex because we're going to want to move everything to the bottom left or bottom right, sorry. So we're going to say justify content flex end and align items flex end. So that should push whatever's in these screens. So just for this, we're just going to add, let's say 120 times. This will actually be in a span with the class of operator. And this span will have a times in it. Then after this, we'll have 100 there like that. So that is going to be how we see it. And this will then just say 12,000 like that. So if we just refresh, you can see that's now in the bottom right. And that's currently what we're styling with this. We're going to set the color of everything to be white. We're actually going to set the text align as well to be right because we want all the text to sit on the right side. And we want this to be a flex of 110%. So it takes up as much space as allowed. And there you go. You can see all of that there. And that's looking a bit better. But we want to actually style the display in that itself. So we're just going to get the input. And we're just going to set the font size. Font size to be 125 rem, 1.25 rem, 25. Margin bottom will be 0.5 rem just to give it some spacing. So there you go, but it looks a little bigger now. And then we want to get the display dot output. And this, again, font size, we're going to do 3 rem because we want this to be quite big. We want it to show off. We're going to give a font weight of 700 here to make it quite big. We'll give it a max width of 100% overflow scroll. Now that will add this border. So to remove that, we're just going to say auto, and that should fix it. We'll also give this a width of 100% as well, just so it stretches the whole way out. And there you go. That's looking a lot better. Now the next thing I'll do is add in that operator styling. So we want to say display.operator, and we're going to give this a color of it's just a little highlight color of 66666. There we go. And that should make operators look like that. Now, we're going to have some other things here. So I've done an operator, but if we have brackets or percentage, we want to show that slightly different. And to do that, what I want to do is basically just copy this, paste that down, change this to be brackets. And I'm also going to set the exact same thing for percent. And this is going to be a slightly lighter bluey greeny color, probably more greeny to be fair. And there you go. So you can't actually see that being used yet, but we will be using that later on. Let's get on to the keys. So the keys are going to have a background color slightly lighter than the current one we have. So we're going to say 29 2D 36. Just 2D. And there you go. That should make it slightly lighter grey, as you can see there. We want to add some padding around this of 1.5 rem as well. That will bring everything in a bit more. And then let's give it the border radius of 1.5 rem, 1.5 rem, 0, 0. Because we only want the border radius to be at the top end of this here. And there we go. And then under here, we just want to display this as a grid element because we're going to do this in a grid. So we're going to say grid template columns, repeat 4 1 FRs. So this stands for repeat a grid pattern exactly the same width with 1 fraction each. So there you go. That's now created that. Now we're going to do the same for the rows. And we're going to say rows. However, we're going to change this to be 5 because there is actually 5 rows there. And there you go. We're going to have this all there set and ready to go. We then want to give a grid gap. And we're going to set this to 1 rem. This should give it some nice spacing around the actual elements. And then let's give a box shadow of 0 pixels, -2 pixels, 16 pixels, RGBA, 0, 0, 0, 0.2. And there you go. You just got that subtle shadow there. It gives it a bit more depth to it. Cool. Now we want to actually get each key. So individual key, we want to give this a position of relative because we're going to be using some absolute positioning on the inside. We then want to display it as a block element. We want to give it a flex of 110%. We're going to set the height to 0. Now this is important because it will break if not. We then want to give it the, we don't need the flex 111. This isn't a flex element. We just need the height. We then want to say padding top 100%. Now what padding top does is it takes the width and it does the percentage calculated from there. So if the width is, let's say, 200 pixels, 100% of that is going to be 200 pixels. And there you go. We're now going to get some square buttons. Let's give these a background color of 262933, and there you go. You can see the buttons there. Although you may see it looks a bit dodgy right now, but don't worry, we're going to fix that in a second. So we're going to give this a border radius of 1M, so they're a bit more rounded buttons. We're going to give this a transition of 0.2 seconds because we're going to add some animation to this, and we're going to say use to select none because we don't want the user to be able to select the text. We then want to get the actual keys dot key span, and we're going to set this position to absolute. We're going to set top to 50%, left to 50%, and then we're going to set a transition and transform and translate, of -50%, -50%, save, and now the text and that is in the center. We then want to get, when you hover on a key, we want to set the box shadow to inset and go 0 pixels, 0 pixels, 8 pixels spread, RGBA, and well, 0, 0, 0, 0.2, just like that. And refresh. Now, when you hover over them, you can see they do a little inset thing there. We also want to go back to the span, and we want to just set the font size to be about 2 rem, which should make them a lot bigger. Font weight of 700. And let's give them a color of white for now. And there you go. So that's everything white. However, I want these buttons to stand out. So in our HTML, we actually gave everything unique classes, either action, operator, or nothing. So let's target the keys.key.operator. And what we're going to do is we're literally going to steal this color from here, add it in there, and we're actually going to steal this one as well. And we're going to replace this with keys.key. Oh, and sorry, this needs to be the span afterwards. And this should be action, and then the span. And if we refresh, you can see our actions now have this greeny blue turquoisey tint, and the actual operators have a reddy orangey tint to them. This orangey color, salmon color. It's definitely a salmon. And that's it. That's the styling done. As you can see, it looks pretty good. And that's all we need to do to actually style this out. So the next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to say, we're going to want to get all our keys inside our JavaScript. So we're going to start on our actual functionality now, because currently it doesn't do anything. So we're just going to get all of the .keys, right? We're then going to get the display input from document.query selector, and this is going to be .display.input. We then want to get, well, we want to copy this and just do the output there. So we'll just copy this and change that to output. And there you go. That should now be output as well. There should be no space there. I think it's just being weird. Yep, that's fine. Cool. So now we get the output. We then want just an input. Now this is just going to be our stringed input. So this here. And we're going to basically say for each, let key of key, so we get each key, and we're going to get the value of that key. So we're going to set the value to key.dataset.key. Now the dataset is obviously here where we call data key. That's going to target this key element here and give us that value. So for example, if we hit 8, it's going to pass us the 8 value here. We then want to say key.add event listener of click. And I've also noticed my co-pilot's back on, so I'm just going to turn him off again. I don't know why he keeps coming on. I don't need him. We don't need him. We can do everything without him, can't we? Anyway, so we now want to do a few things. So we're going to have the value, and we're going to start with the value and just check what it's equal to. So we're going to say if it's equal to clear, which is going to be our top button here. So if we click AC, it's going to say clear. And what we want to do is actually, we just want to reset everything. So we just want to say input is equal to nothing. The display input dot inner HTML is just going to be equal to nothing. And our display output dot inner HTML will also be equal to nothing. So now we've done our clear. We're actually going to do else if, and we're going to check if the value is equal to backspace. And if it's equal to the backspace, we just want to basically remove the last element on the end of it. So we're going to say input is equal to input.slice 0 minus 1. And that's just going to remove the last element on the setup here, or in the string. We're then going to display input.inner HTML, and we're going to set this to be input. And we're actually going to clean this input later on. So we're going to have a function called like clean input maybe, or something like that. But we'll do that later on. We're then going to say else if value is equal to equals. We want to basically get the result, which is going to be an evaluation of our input. Now, this isn't very safe normally. So normally, evaluation is frowned upon because the input, it basically can leave your code open to hacks. Basically, what it'll do is it'll take a string and try and evaluate it as JavaScript code, and then it'll try to execute it. So people can pass JavaScript code. However, the only input we're allowing the user to give is this numbers. So the damage they can do is numbers, which means they're probably not going to do much. Plus, this is on the front end of the site. So the only thing they can do is execute JavaScript that will happen on their own computer and no one else's. So this is pretty safe to run. So for those who say you shouldn't use evaluate to calculate things, I disagree. I think this works fine, and if you do it properly and safely, it will be fine. We're also going to prepare this input before it goes in there normally, but right now we're just going to, for the sake of getting through this, we're not going to do that just yet. And we're going to set the output now equal to the result, which we will again clean later on to add in commas and stuff like that. Finally, we actually want to do something with our brackets here. So you see we've got brackets here, and we want to just add in, we basically just want to check if the brackets, else if our value is equal to brackets. We're going to want to add in brackets, but we need the brackets to be kind of smart. So they need to know whether they should add an open bracket or a closed bracket, and so forth. So in here, we just want to say, it's going to be quite a long if statement. We're going to now say input dot index off, and we're going to check where the bracket is. So we're going to say if the first bracket doesn't exist, or if the input dot index off the bracket minus is not equal to -1, but and the input dot index of a closing bracket does also exist. And so this, as I said, this is really long. I will explain it as good as I can. Input dot last index off. So the last index of this is greater than input dot last index of a closing bracket. Then what we want to do is say input is plus equal to an opening bracket. So that must be really confusing and scary. Let me just zoom out quickly to explain this a bit better. So we have this first section here, and this first section just says if there is no first bracket. So if we don't have a singular starting bracket, then we have to add a starting bracket, because that's how it works. You need a starting bracket. We then say, or if we do have a starting bracket and we have an outer bracket, so we have two brackets, and the last index of this, so if this has one of these following it, so this is greater than, meaning it's after this, then we want to then add a new opening bracket. So that may be a bit confusing, but basically all this does, it checks if there's a bracket. If there's no brackets, then it will add the starting bracket, or it checks if the last brackets were closed off with a closing bracket, then it adds a new starting bracket. Now that's not done. We now need to do a similar thing for the closing bracket. So now we need to say else if input dot index of a closing bracket, an opening bracket is not equal to -1, meaning it does exist, and input dot index of a closing bracket is equal to -1. So that means if it doesn't exist, then we want to say input is minus equal to a closing bracket. However, we now need to do another or. So I'm actually going to break these down to make this a bit more easier to read. So this is our first statement. This is going to be our second here. There's a lot of ors and ands here, so breaking it down may make it easier for you guys to understand and read. So then we're going to say or. So let's zoom back in here as well. So we're going to say or input dot index of the opening bracket is not equal to -1. So if the opening bracket doesn't exist, it does exist, sorry, and the input dot index of the closing bracket is not equal to -1, meaning there is a closing bracket, and the last one of the open brackets is greater than the input position of the last index. So if there is one of these before the last one of those, that means we can add another bracket. And now I need to apologize because this is confusing, but it works. It's just a way of checking if there's a starting bracket or an ending bracket and whether you should add one or not. I hope that wasn't too confusing and that didn't put anyone off this. It's very long-winded, I know, and I apologize. But now we just need to say display input dot inner HTML is equal to our input there. We then want to say else, else, and we just want to say input plus equals to value. So if none of these are true, so it's not a clear backspace and equals or brackets, then we're just going to add whatever we click, so 8, 9 times decimal, straight into our element. Now this is going to have some issues and we're going to need to validate this later on. But again, I'm just going to demonstrate what the bare basics here, like this. And there you go. So that should now... Oh, we need to also clear this. Boop, and remove this. There we go. So now if we say 8 times 9 is equal to, it gives us 72. If we clear this and say brackets 8 divided by 2 brackets, we have an error. So now that's something that shouldn't be happening. So let's figure out what that was. So bracket, closing bracket causes us not a number anymore. And that's probably something I've done wrong somewhere. So let's have a look what happens here. Okay, guys, I think my mistake is right here. I did minus equal bracket when I should have done plus equal bracket. So now let's do this. 8 times 9 plus 8 divided by 2 is equal to 76. And there you go. That's now working. We can clear this. And we can do a bunch of other things. We can add a percentage, but this isn't actually going to work yet. We need to do some validation before we do this. So we can say, backspace. So backspace also works. That's good to know. And what we want to do here is just say 89% times, let's say, 9. And there you go. We get an unexpected token. It doesn't work like that. We can fix that later on. Cool, or in a second. So there we go. So most of this works so far. So we can actually do basic calculations. However, there's a few bugs. We can do 2, point, which is a bug. We can go 2.2 plus 3 equals. There's a lot of bugs we need to fix. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do something called a clean input. So we're going to clean the input first, and then we're also going to clean the output. So let's start off with the input. So we'll say function clean input, and we're basically just going to create an array from the input character. So we're going to say equals to input dot split by nothing. So we're going to get every single character in here. We're then going to get the let input array length equal to input array dot length. Just to make that easier. So there we go. We now have those two elements. And we just want to say for let I equal 0 and I is less than input array length I plus plus. So now we want to check every single character and see and clean it so it goes into our input properly and it looks nice. Now this is actually pretty simple. We want to go in here and say input array I is equal to a, if it's equal to a time symbol, then what we want to do is we want to say the input array I is equal to, and we're going to use this space, and we're going to pass through a span with the class of operator, and then close the span. And we're going to leave spaces on either end so it has a space, and we're then going to put the time symbol in there. So this means anytime we hit times, it's actually going to display now as an actual times and be highlighted. Now we need to basically else if this, and we could actually just copy this here, paste, and give that enough one. And we could say, for example, if it's a slash, then we want to get the divide. Now I need to find the actual divide. There it is. And there we go. So we get the input array defined. And we can copy this. Oh, and this one will now be a plus. And this one just needs to be a plus in here. We don't have to change it. We're going to do a minus in here and do the minus. And then we're going to do our brackets as well. So we just want to say opening bracket. Oh, it's actually going to be an opening bracket. However, we don't want spaces on the start or end of our opening brackets. This will be fine. Copy, paste, and this will be our closing bracket. Closing bracket. And finally, we're just going to do one for our percentage. So we're going to go percent, and we'll change this to be percent. We also want to rename this to be percent, and I've just noticed our brackets need to be renamed to bracket and bracket. Or bracket, sorry, I think we used an S. Let's have a look. What did we use? Display brackets. Yeah, there you go. And then at the end of all this, all we want to do is return our input array dot join as a singular string. So now we just take our clean input and we go to anywhere we do display input and we just wrap that up like this. So now we can just copy this and paste that in any position we think we need. So we don't need it for display output, but any input, it should clean it before displaying. So if we say 8 times 8, you can see it looks a lot neater. If we go plus 5 times 5 is equal to, and there you go, you can see there, it does it all for you, and it looks pretty good now, the actual output there. So now we need to clean our input, because if we said 120 times 100 is equal to 12,000, we expect a comma here. So let's actually clean our input. So we're going to say function clean output, and we'll pass through the output for this. And there's a couple of things we need to do. We actually need to steal the decimal place, and we need to get our output as a string. So we say output is equal to output dot to string. We then want to say our decimal, so we need to steal the decimal place if there is one, and we'll say output string dot split by the dots, and we're going to get the after area. We then want to get our output string and set that now equal to the same thing, but we're only going to get the beginning bit before the decimal. So after here, we want to say, let our output array equal an output string dot split. So we're going to get each individual character again, and then we're going to get our, we don't actually need a length. I don't know why I did the length. We can say, if our output array dot length is greater than 3, so if it's greater than 3, then we need to basically go through every third element minus 3 here. And then we say I is greater than 0, I is minus equal to 3. So so we're going to basically get this I is equal to every single third output. So we're going to go backwards through this. And we're going to say, because otherwise if we went forwards, then it may look a bit dodgy, and we don't want that. So we now need to output array dot splice I0 with a comma. So that is just, that is going to take our, what do I do here? Output array dot length. This should be fine. Expected, I think that is fine. I think it's just being weird. I'm not sure why this is being weird. Hopefully that is not a bug. We will see. Anyway, and then we just want to get our decimal. So if there was a decimal place, we then want to say output array dot push a decimal point. And we just want to say output array dot push our decimal point as well. We then want to just return a output array dot join all of it back together. And there you go. So now we need to take our clean output and go to where we evaluate inside of here. And just take our result and pass that through here. So now if we refresh and we say 120... Oh, there is definitely a bug. Expected token at main 80. It really is bugging here. Why? Oh, that's a 4. That should be if. That should have been an if, not a 4. So there we go. So now we can say 120 times 100 is equal to 12,000 with a decimal place. Let's just make it a bit bigger. And there you go. You can see we get 1,440,000 right there. Awesome. So there we go. Now, that's good, but we still have a few other issues we need to do. And one of those is we need to actually create before we actually pass our output, we need to validate the input, and we also need to prepare it for output. So we're going to start off by validating input. Validate input, we're going to take a value, and this one is going to say let last input equal input.slice minus 1. Oh. We just want to get the last element to know what we last entered. We don't want to say if value is equal to a dot. So if we're trying to add a new dot, but our last input was also a dot, then return false. We don't want to, it means validation's wrong. We're not allowed to add a dot after a dot. Now you could add loads of validation. There's probably more validation that I'm going to actually add. But I just want to show you how you can add your validations. Now we want to say if basically any of these are equal to an operator. Now this is messy. I'm actually going to create a new way of doing this. I'm going to say let operators equal, and this is going to be an array of operators. So we're going to say a plus, a minus, a times, and a forward slash. If any of them are these, so we're going to say if value dot include, or if operators dot includes the value, meaning if one of those is an operators, we then check if our our operators includes our last input, and if it does, then we return false. Else, return true. And finally, we will just return true for anything else. So what we're checking if any of these operators, so let's go here now. Let's just refresh this. Say 8 times, that shouldn't work. And we basically need to go here, get our validate, and actually call this in before we do any input. So here at the else, we just want to say if validate input value, and if that comes back true, now we should be able to do it. So let's refresh. We seem to have an error. 7 times 8. Something is not working again. Let me just figure this out. It's all part of the process, is having errors and fixing them. So we validate our input, we get our value, then if that's all good, we just add the value onto the end of our input and display the input here for our clean output. That's fine. That's fine. It might be in here where I tried to be fancy with this operator selector here. All I want to do is say, oh, determines whether an array includes a certain element returning true or false. So if this includes an operator, plus, minus, times, or slash. Oh, also, I didn't input wrong there, and that is why it doesn't work. There you go, 8 times, and now we can no longer double click times or any of the other operators here. Times 9 is equal to 72. 8 point, we can no longer multi-select the point. So that is good. We say 2 times 5.5 is equal to, and there is another bug we need to fix. So you can see here it's going off screen. Now to fix that, we should have, it should be automatically flowing, but for some reason it's not. We'll figure that out in a second. But there you go. That's validating the input for us. So 8 times 99 is equal to 792. And there you go. That's all working great. But we now need to just do one last thing, and that's prepare our input. Because let's say if we do 10% times 9, it's not going to work. It's going to throw an error, and it's not going to work. So we need to prepare our input here. So at the end here, we're going to say function prepare input. And this is just preparing the input for the output to actually calculate it. So we're going to say input array is equal to input.split again. So we're going to split it into nothing. We're going to say for, let me just scroll down here and zoom in. So we're going to say for let I equal 0, I is less than input array.length, I plus plus. We then want to say if input array is equal to I, or I is equal to a percentage, then what we want to do now is say input array I is equal to divide 100. Now that may seem really confusing, but how we can convert a number to a percentage is by dividing it by 100, and that will give us the actual percent or the decimal value of the percentage here. And that will work, as it should just work like that. And then we can return input array.join. Now, you can add more preparation in here. You might want to check if there's any like miscellaneous code or something that shouldn't be in there. And the same with anything else. You could do a bunch of prepare, but I'm just going to do the basics there and just do the percentage. And then let's go up to our area where we actually evaluate. And before we pass the input, let's prepare the input like that. So now let's say 80 times 10% should equal 8. And there you go. That is exactly 80 times 10. And that works perfectly. So that is how you build a calculator inside of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I hope you've enjoyed. If you have, don't forget to leave a thumbs up, smash that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.